Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Alex Van Gils, and I'd like to welcome you to this live weekly Dharma gathering with Shambhala Online. Tonight's session will begin with a guided meditation and a talk titled Sobriety and Meditation by our teacher, Dr. Shanté Smalls, and we'll end with a question and answer discussion. Shanté Paradigm Smalls, PhD, is a teacher and mentor in the Shambhala Buddhist lineage of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche and Sakyong Nippon Rinpoche. Shanté has been a student of Shambhala since 2006. They are assistant professor of Black culture and literature, as well as a performer and performance studies scholar. Dr. Smalls is a dog enthusiast, a sci-fi nerd, and a yoga practitioner, and has published works on hip-hop, film, queer performance, and a host of other scholarly topics. For our Q&A tonight, we will facilitate questions with the raise hand feature on Zoom. So you can see there's a little button on your screen where you can say raise hand. If you are selected for a question, then you'll be spotlighted to ask your question on screen. Tonight's session is being recorded, so if you'd prefer not to be seen, please turn off your camera feature. There's a little picture of a video camera and it says stop video. Please note that you will also be recorded when you're asking a question. The recording of tonight's gathering can be accessed by the end of day tomorrow in your My Programs tab on your Shambhala Online account. So with that, and without further ado, I'll pass to you, Shanté. Thank you so much for leading us tonight.
Thank you, Alex. And good evening. I'm just gonna look at the participant and see who's here. Okay, okay. A few familiar names. So tonight we're gonna start with guided meditation. I just want to give a few caveats. It's storming pretty badly in New York. Yesterday we had some tornadoes in the Bronx and lightning strikes in Brooklyn and hail in New Jersey. So that's a little better today. So my dog is afraid of the thunder. And so she's here being near me as if I can do anything. But so hopefully we won't hear any loud booms. So please take a comfortable seated position. And that can be on a cushion as I'm on, or in a chair, couch. And if you're able to sit upright with a sense of a relaxed and open, soft front of your body, kind of letting it all hang out a bit without being kind of slumped, but just being relaxed, not tucking in the belly or anything like that. And then sort of balancing that soft, open, soft front with a kind of solid, strong, upright back. That's not tight and it's not clenched, but is a complement to the soft front. It's a support to the soft front. So the back of our body holds us up and carries so much of our tension. And in this sense, we're just feeling a sense of upliftedness. Your lower body, your legs can be crossed or in whatever kind of comfortable seated position you're in. If you're sitting in a chair, your feet can be on the ground with your knees at 90 degrees. And, feel comfortable to adjust your posture in order to feel as comfortable as possible. The posture can help support the mind's clarity. And you can have a sense of your top of your body, your head that's balanced on your spine. Can just be loose. You can even just turn it a little bit side to side. Just have it not be rigid, but to have it be placed where it is. With your eyes open, if that works for you, and your gaze pointing toward the floor, about a human's length in front of you, 4 to 6 feet. Letting your eyes see what they see. Letting your ears hear what they hear. Letting your skin feel what it feels. Letting your nose smell what it smells. Just being in the space you're in without trying to control it or manage it. And without trying to control or manage your inner space either. The mouth can be slightly open, jaw, chin lightly tucked. And just take a moment to check in with yourself, noticing your any emotions or physical sensations, thoughts arising. Just have a little check-in with yourself. How am I doing? That's a sense of get ready, get set, and then we're going to relax. And whatever your state is, you maybe have a little pain, tightness, you may have coming in from a day of work. We're not trying to adjust that state. You're just trying to know what it is, know what your internal weather is. So that you're not surprised. And you can just begin to feel the your body breathing. Noticing with your sense faculties, let's just say your senses, your sense consciousnesses, what's happening. In terms of where do you feel your breath? Maybe in your throat or your front of your body, back of your body. You feel your lungs expanding and contracting, your ribs rising and falling, maybe the shoulders rising and falling. The temperature of your breath, the sound of your breath, the taste of it. Maybe you feel the breath in your hips or in your lower back or somewhere else. You're just feeling into this sensation of your body breathing. that is the object of your meditation, or if you will, your mindfulness, your paying attention. And as you're feeling the body breathing, you may notice bodily sensations, emotions, or thoughts, or all of them. And the instruction is to acknowledge that they're happening. There's a twinge in your knee, or a heat in your back, or an itch in your neck. You could even incorporate those things into your wider awareness field. When you notice irritation arise, or anxiety, or happiness, just notice it. Note that it's there. Or perhaps cognition begins to do what it does, and you begin to build a story about what's in your field of perception. Again, you can just notice it and come back to the feeling of your body breathing. So we notice what's actually happening with us internally or externally, and then we just come back to our object of meditation, which is the feeling of our body breathing. We let any external sounds, thunder, fans, the AC, the rain. I'm describing the sounds in my atmosphere. The dog snoring, neighbors walking overhead. We welcome those sounds into our meditation. While we're remaining in contact with our object of meditation, which is feeling the body breathing. if you notice yourself distracted by your internal or your external environment, that's not a problem. You noticed, which is great. You became aware of your own distraction. You acknowledge it, and then you come back to the feeling of the body breathing. Okay. So, welcome. Um, Good evening, or whatever, good morning, whatever time it is, where you are, or when you are watching. I'm really um, very honored to be teaching on this topic tonight. Originally, I was supposed to be hosting it. Another person was supposed to be teaching, but he had another obligation, so I stepped in. And I want to say first off, I think the topic is a little bit broader than sobriety from alcohol or drugs or substances, but we could even say more broadly recovery. And that I'm going to talk a little bit about my excuse me, own experience, but there are lots of forms of recovery from addiction or let's say patterns and habits, habitual patterns and habits that have really interfered with our ability to live a good life. So that could be, substances or food or gambling or sex or even, our emotional life or codependency. So I want to just broaden that field a little bit, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the relationship for me personally between sobriety and meditation. And in fact, my own recovery in 12-step was how I came to start meditating. So I'll say a little bit about that, tell my story, as they say in the rooms. And I also want to say that, 12-step recovery is not the only, there are many, many other forms. This is just my own experience, strength and hope. And so, as they say, write what you know. I would say that in Buddhist terms or in Dharmic terms that I was born, when I was born, I don't remember, but my earliest memories, I would say maybe my earliest memories are really around 3 or so, 2 or 3. I have a slightly earlier memory, which I'm not sure if is a memory or is a story that I was told that I have made into a memory. But basically, when I was like 6 months old, I like escaped from the crib or whatever. So there you go. But my earliest really memory that feels like my own was, being around 2 or 3 or so, and having a tremendous amount of fear, particularly around. I was very obsessed with the ending of the world. So I grew up towards the end of the Cold War. If people don't know what that is, you can Google it. So growing up, there were a lot of movies like war games and different things about how the United States and the then Soviet Union would sort of obliterate each other in the world through nuclear holocaust. As a matter of fact, I'm watching Chernobyl right now, which is a miniseries on HBO, and it's really heart-wrenching and also quite amazing. And I'm remembering some memories I had from that incident. I was young, very quite young, but I remember it was just a few months after the Challenger incident where the spaceship, the U.S. spaceship blew up, and then a few months later, Chernobyl happened. And so I thought, oh, this is the end of the world. It confirmed my fear. So I had a lot of fear about the world ending and feeling quite cheated that I was born when I was born, although now I'm very grateful for the time in which I was born and lived, and feeling like I wouldn't get to grow up. So that's how I really, really felt at a young age, that things were going to come to an end, and there I was. And my first, I would say, major kind of form of escape was really fantasy. So I really loved pretending that I was an alien who's like, it was a very elaborate story, but basically as an alien, I was dropped off with these people who were my parents, but they weren't really my parents, and my alien parents were going to come pick me up. So that just tells you a little bit about me. That's the kind of child I was. I had a very rich imagination. There's nothing wrong with that. The only problem for me was that I felt it was really, the imagination really didn't come from a place of kind of joy and exploration. It really came from a desire to be elsewhere. And experienced some traumas early in my life, and I think it intensified the desire to escape. And also I, was born to people who had unresolved trauma. And their parents, my grandparents, and probably their parents as well. So the intergenerational or epigenetic aspect of trauma being passed on through the genes and through behavior and through kind of storytelling I was very susceptible to that. So by the time I was very, very young, so it was fantasy, then it was books. Great. I love to read. I still love to read. And books also helped me escape. I love the C.S. Lewis line, Witch in the Wardrobe, all that. And I was like, go into my closet and hope like another world would open up. It never happened. And then I could tell a joke about coming out of the closet, but anyway, then very young, I found, it was a little bit different in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s. And I found cigarettes first. I would lie and say that these were from my mom, and I could buy cigarettes at like 10 years old. It's just crazy. Like, these are from my mom who like never smoked a cigarette in her life. Cigarettes I smoked for a long time. It was, I don't know, maybe smoked in 10 years or something, but I really loved cigarettes. And then shortly after that, I really found alcohol. And alcohol at that time was easier to get than other drugs, although that changed as I got older. It was easier to get other drugs than alcohol. But I tell this story sometimes where my first drink was at a New Year's Eve party. I was quite young, 10 or 11, and my parents didn't drink, but they were at this party fancy party in Connecticut, and where I grew up between Connecticut and New York, and I saw this bottle of Heineken. In my memory, it was like a spotlight was on it. I had never had a drink before, but something said that's the way to go. And I was with my older brother. I snuck down and I stole that bottle, and I ran upstairs, and we did little Dixie cup shots of beer. And what I remember is feeling kind of fuzzy and funny, and it was innocent, and I felt a little sick, and I had to go to the bathroom and all that stuff. But my the memory that is seared into my head is I remember coming to in the back of my parents' car. It was quite cold, and I was in my bubble jacket. And what I remember is being in my father's arms, and my mother and my older brother, I don't know where my little brother was at that point, looking over me, and I felt warm and love. And I really didn't remember this memory until maybe a decade ago. And it clicked, and it made a lot of sense that maybe on some kind of cellular level, the level of the unconscious, the bodily level, I associated alcohol with love and warmth and family and intimacy and safety and care. So it wasn't logical. It was a memory and the logic of a child. So I pursued that feeling for a bit. And I was very fortunate in the sense that I got sober as a teenager. So I never had a legal drink. I had a pretty bad, it's not the exact correct form to get into here, but I had pretty intense and bad experiences, lots of bad experiences coming from my drinking and my drug use. And including, excuse me, a lot of physical damage that I did. And I was a real drunk. I was a real alcoholic and blackout drinker and all the kind of things. And I really valued drinking and drugs. They were very important to me in the sense that I didn't want them to be taken away, and I felt that they were helping me to live. And in a sense, they really were, but they also caused me a tremendous pain and caused me to cause others tremendous pain. So through a series of events, I ended up going to first a detox, outpatient detox, and then an outpatient, and then things happened and I had to go away. I had to be sent away to an inpatient. And that was the summer before my senior year of high school. And I wasn't alone. There were other people who had been sent to rehab. But it was pretty dramatic. And I go to this place and for 28 days and something happened to me and I really felt like maybe I don't have to drink or do drugs anymore. Okay, so I hear that, I get sober, I start going to meetings, 12-step meetings, find a whole bunch of young people. We're totally cuckoo. It's awesome. And I meet these guys who are young, not as young as I was, but if I was 16, 17, they were maybe 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, that age. And they were punk rock kids and they were meditators. They were in different sort of insight in different places, Dharma punks. And I was like, oh, tell me, I'm interested in Buddhism, but I never got any, I just read about it and, I sort of religious in the sort of religious sense, but I don't, know anything about it. And they talked a little about practice. I think someone, gave me some meditation instruction very poorly, I think. And that began my journey. And really, I would say for the next 5 or so years, that journey was mostly reading. Like I would read books like Zen and Recovery, which I think was an early book that was looking at those two things together. And I was on an exploration for meditation. I tried a lot of different things, walking meditation, and I used to run a lot and listening to tapes and or they weren't podcasts then, but CDs and different things, and then and sometimes sitting meditation. I would go to meditation meetings. Actually, I would go to recovery meetings that were focused on the 11th step, which is about prayer and meditation. So I kind of learned how to meditate in the rooms, in recovery rooms. But in college, I started to get more serious about meditating, and really after college was where I started to investigate, or in college started to investigate sort of Zen, and after college, and then I really fell into a community, Soka Gakkai, the Nichiren Buddhist community. I just want to read a couple of things before I finish telling my story. This is from a book called The Language of the Heart. And the chapter here is called The Next Frontier, Emotional Sobriety. And it was written, this is a letter from Bill Wilson from January 1958, or it's like an article. He's talking about like how to like have good emotional life. Last autumn, depression, having no really rational cause at all, almost took me to the cleaners. I began to be scared that I was in for another long chronic spell. He suffered from chronic, debilitating depression after he founded Alcoholics Anonymous. Considering the grief I've had with depressions, it wasn't a bright prospect. I kept asking myself, why can't the 12 steps work to release depression? By the hour, I started at the St. Francis prayer. It's better to comfort than to be comforted. Here was the formula after all, but why didn't it work? Suddenly, I realized what the matter was. My basic flaw had always been dependence, almost absolute dependence on people or circumstances to supply me with prestige, security, and the like. So we might call this dukkha, or suffering in Buddhist terms. Failing to get these things according to my perfectionist dreams and specifications, I fought for them, and when defeat came, so did my depression. And what I began to really experience, particularly as I began to study more and practice more, have a bodily practice, sitting meditation, was that the kind of view I had of myself, that I thought I could kind of grind. There's a little bit, I would describe like the typical person in, let's say, a certain kind of 12-step program as very controlled, and vulnerability being very, very scary. And that can play out in a lot of different ways. People becoming very rigid and like kind of by the book, as it were, or people really throw themselves into work or to exercise or to sex or to, family or whatever. And there's a kind of imbalance that continues. And of course, there's nothing like the kind of displacement and sublimation of drinking and doing drugs, but it's an imbalance as a human being. And what I really found for myself was that there was a tenderness that came with a softening that came with meditating for me. And it was actually quite scary. And it wasn't a replacement for my recovery, my 12-step recovery at all. It was very much, I have found them to be complementary. And for me, in fact, to be life-saving. Like I need both. One of the things I really love about 12-step recovery is that I'm a very, I like instructions. So, excuse me. I like being able to kind of see how to apply things. And there is a process of kind of reading and contemplating and studying and also writing that I have found and continue to find very valuable in relation to another person. So like in meditation communities, one might have a meditation teacher or a Kalyana Mitra, a spiritual friend, or a meditation instructor. In a lot of 12-step communities, one can opt to have a sponsor, someone who's walked the path before you. And so going through this process of writing out my story, um, thinking about restoration to sanity, what a sane life looks like, thinking about what a relationship with a higher power looks like. For me, that's changed. I used to be very, very theistic, and that worked for me for a really long time. And then one day, actually through really getting deeply into meditation and then becoming a Buddhist, it changed. It didn't completely go away, but it really changed. And there were different kinds of thoughts that came up, and it was a crisis of faith, and that was great. It turned out to be great. Doing an inventory, looking at patterns of my life and writing them down and sharing it with another person, which is so scary. And I've done that many, many times. That get me in trouble, resentment, fear, and the categories you can inventory: resentment, fear, and sex. Trouble areas for many, many a person. And I found that whole process of doing that, making amends to people that I've harmed, going to them and saying, this is how I hurt you, here's how I'm going to make restitution. Those things are powerful. And that discipline actually really prepared me in many ways for the discipline of a meditation practice and a meditative life, if I could say that. If that's fair to say. The discipline of boredom, when you go to meetings, I've been sober. I got sober in July 25th of 1992. I've been sober since 16. I'm 43. I'm almost 27 years sober. You've seen it all, but it's like I still go to meetings. I still work with a sponsor. I still have people I sponsor. So you work with a certain level of boredom, but also a level of community. And I was actually in a meeting last night, and it was an anniversary meeting, and that's where people who are celebrating lengths of time, whether it's 90 days or years of sobriety. And I was listening to people, someone had 4 years, someone had 23 years. And it was like, it's just so sweet. It was just like so loving. And people were just talking about how much they love these people and appreciated their presence in the group and how important community is. And I was thinking about that, as a sangha. And I think what 12-step could really teach sanghas is really I really think this idea of inventory is really important, that the group or the sangha can actually take account of its mission and if it's doing it well. Are we welcoming? Are we self-sustaining financially? Are we do people know about us? Are we part of the community? Things like that. And I think, where meditation communities really could teach 12-step communities is really about the value of spaciousness and not knowing, not always having to have an answer. The really valuing kind of connection and lineage, and sticking with things through the kind of ups and downs. And I think it's sort of, for me, there's an irony and there's a poignancy, and maybe there's even a reason that I ended up in as a Shambhala Buddhist, as a sober person. And when I came to Shambhala in 2006, it was not wild, I heard many stories about the wild drinking, and would come to hear more. But I was actually quite shocked, because when I was at both in Zen communities and in SGI and Nichiren Daishonin, Nichiren Buddhism, I never saw alcohol at any, that's not to say there wasn't, but it just wasn't, that wasn't really. And, there was always a party at Shambhala. It was always a literal party or a feast or a this or a that, or the teachers were drinking. I was like, I don't understand sake, why, and I was just like, okay, this is a little weird. because this is not necessarily a safe space for me as a sober person. And I've had people say that to me. But at the same time, I knew my own mind, and I knew my own desires, and a very strong foundation in recovery. And so I never really put myself in a situation in meditation where that was going to happen. So the first time I went on retreat, I made sure I told people in recovery where I was going. I made sure the people in retreat knew I was in recovery. I would sometimes force them to let us have meetings. So every retreat I've gone on, there have been other people in recovery, and we've had meetings, whether people are in 12-step or other things. It doesn't matter. We just come together, and we'll in a little secret room, and there'll be 20 or 30 of us often who will just feel that relief. We're on retreat, but all the mental stuff is coming up. So it was sort of ironic that, Shambhala, with its legacy of alcoholism in this leadership, that I would feel the most comfortable. Maybe that's why I felt the most comfortable in the practices. Maybe it was like I know I'm drawn to the alcoholic founder and the brilliance, right? And understanding the two ways that an alcoholic can be, which is incredibly charming, wise, open, reasonable, and then a total psycho. Like, that's not, to me, that's very, very, makes a lot of sense. But to people who don't understand maybe alcoholism or addiction, that seems, it is contradictory in the sense of, if we want people to just be one way, but it's a kind of extreme example of how all humans are. And what I found for myself is that I'm someone who needs a lot of help. And I've been really blessed or graced or fortunate to find these things that, interestingly, people sometimes think of as cults. Like, they'll say like 12 steps a cult. And I'm like, man, you've never been to a 12-step meeting if you think it's a cult, because people are like really rebellious and they don't like to listen, and there's no leader. And it's an inverted triangle, where the most powerful part of the organization is actually at the bottom, and it's of service, to the individual or to the group. And even in, Shambhala, where people were like, or, other Buddhists, people are like, oh, it's a cult. I'm like, you can go and leave as you want. Now, I don't know what things were like before. And there's a sense of rebellion, which I think is really good. There's a good rebellion in Shambhala. I think that needs to be harnessed more. And the rebellion, I think, it's not a rebellion that's, there's a 12-step meeting called Rebel Dogs. And it's not a rebellion that's about, I don't want to listen. It's a kind of liveliness. It's a kind of aliveness, curiosity, openness. So there's a rebellion that's like about bucking an authority, teenage rebellion. But this is not that kind of rebellion. There's no authority except one's own conviction. But that spark of kind of curiosity that keeps things open and welcoming and willing to improve. I guess that's what I'm saying is rebellion. It's a kind of desire for transformation that's not like, let's slaughter everyone or whatever, but that's about galvanizing energy. And I think, I'll just say this finally, I think for me, what's become very paramount is how deep I can go in both of these lineages of knowledge or truth or wakefulness, that I can really go as deep as I want, you know? I can get as open and as tender as I want. There's no limit to the amount of wakefulness that can occur. And I think for me, though, that wakefulness and that openness is really grounded in relationship. It's grounded in relationship with other people. It's grounded in transmission. There's an emphasis in both, in recovery and in Buddhism and meditation, on transmission and working with other people. You know, even in Theravadan communities, you know, that it's relational. You know, and a lot of times we think about meditation as individual, right? I meditate, but it's meant to be, you know, three jewels, meant to be. The Buddha was an example of a wakeful human being, and is possible we all can realize our Buddhahood. The Dharma as the pathway to truth, right? The Dharma is the teachings and including meditation, but also Dharma teaching sutras, the words of the Buddha. And the sangha, the community of practitioners. So that we need those three jewels to kind of achieve enlightenment or wakefulness. And a similar in recovery, you have recovery, unity, and service. So the individual's recovery, the unity of the group that helps the individual to recover, and that becomes a community of practitioners, as it were. And service meaning, you know, service. So, you know, picking up chairs, or, you know, being the person who opens the meeting, or taking someone out to coffee, or taking someone to rehabs, which I've done many, many times, or, you know, whatever that is. So that there's this quality of this like three-legged stool in each that helps to buoy our individual lives, that's always in community, always in relationship to community. And finally, I think both are really good supplements or complements to also, you know, I haven't met anyone in recovery who doesn't need a good psychotherapist or some kind of therapist. Some people are very resistant to that. And it's actually very similar with people in meditation communities. And so I found that for me, I feel very fortunate. I have 12-step, I have a Buddhist, you know, or meditation community, I have therapists, I have a body practice, you know, do yoga and other things. And I have, you know, friends and family. And so I think that these communities are about expanding our relationship to the world, not becoming more insular. So I think I'll stop there. I went on for a bit, and I would love to hear any questions that people have.
Thank you so much for that, Shanté. And if people have questions, there's a button that says raise hand on your Zoom software. So if you press raise hand, we'll see it here, and we can turn on your camera. Okay, we've got a hand. So we promoted the person to panelist and then they disappeared. Oh, here they are. Okay.
Hi, Gail. Unmute your microphone.
Okay, go ahead. We should be able to hear you now.
You're good.
I'd like to hear you talk a little bit more about sanghas taking inventory, what that might be like. Yeah, just anything about that, because that seems really important for Shambhala at this point.
Yeah, so I gave a talk last year called Can Shambhala Get Sober? And in it, it was at the New York Center, and we actually did a whole. Gave them a handout, some questions that people could answer. So there is one could modify this, but there is a thing called in 12-step programs. We know about the steps, but there's also something called the traditions. So the steps are for the individual, the traditions are for the group, which is very interesting. And so I'll just give you an example of one of the questions. It is, am I in my group, am I a healing, mending, integrating person, or am I divisive? What about gossip and taking other people's inventories? So that's around a tradition has to do with common welfare of the group. Another set of questions, and I can offline send you to this, give you the link to this. Another kind of thing will say, do I resist formal aspects because I fear them as authoritative? That's in relationship to the organization. Different questions like that. You could say, do I ever try to get a certain group to conform to my standards, not its own? Am I gentle with those who rub me the wrong way, or am I abrasive? Things like that. Do I criticize, or do I trust and support my group officers? Do I have to save face in group discussion, or can I yield in good spirit to the group conscience and work cheerfully along with it? So these kinds of things that one could come up with your own kind of set of questions that pertaining to the group's financial health, or how we treat each other, how we treat, do new people feel welcome? Do old people feel welcome? Ages, anything, you could kind of come up with a list, a way of, and sometimes groups in 12-step do this when they're starting to notice the group's gotten dramatically smaller, or we used to bring meetings to rehabs and do all this stuff, and now we're just kind of insular, or I'm noticing that our group is just it's a kind of one kind of personality, right? So then groups say, oh, I think we need to maybe take stock of what we're doing, and because in that sense, and I think this is true also with Dharma centers, people talk and they say, oh, don't go to that meeting because it's kind of, and people say the same things about Dharma centers. People have opinions about Dharma centers and they share them. So I think that's what I would say. And I can if you email me, I can send you the link to this checklist offline. Thanks for that question. That's great. Any other questions? I'm I'm here for you. I'm happy to answer them. Could you please send that link with this question to everyone? Yes. So I will, what I'll do is, we'll figure out a way to, we'll just get it to the people who registered. Yeah.
So I'll be sending out an email with a link to the recording of this talk once it's been posted, and I'll make sure to include.
Perfect. Great. So I will definitely, I'll send that on to Alex. So thank you. Yeah. One of the things I'll just say, maybe while people are thinking, yeah, you're welcome, thinking of their questions, is I remember at some point in New York, when I was the Rusung, which for those of you who don't know what that is, trying to think of this simple, I was basically in charge of protection of the sangha, its members, and its visitors, and of the space. And so there were a number of us who were in the Kasang and the Dharma protectors who were, we're there to just make people feel welcome and to feel a sort of a first line of anything from first aid to questions around who to talk to about stuff. And one of the things that a number of people said to me, they didn't feel comfortable necessarily communicating it directly, but they wanted me to communicate that it felt weird and really kind of disrespectful that we would have on Sundays Heart of Recovery. And that really got a lot of people from the outside who weren't Shambhala people or even necessarily meditators, but they were people who wanted to come to a 12-step meeting that also integrated meditation. So you get a lot of people, who were turned off by, say, AA or NA or Al-Anon or whatever like that, but they liked rational recovery or Heart of Recovery that a lot of Shambhala centers had. But Sundays, as many people know, if there was a program happening, that would also often be when there was a feast and there was often alcohol being served. And, I never thought about that, even as a person in recovery, that on Sundays we'd have these meetings, recovery meetings, where people would be in Overeaters Anonymous or whatever, and we'd have all this food, sugar, and alcohol. And so we started saying, let's have the feast, instead of having it in the community room, which is the first space you come into when you walk in, let's have it inside of the space where we held the meditation retreat, which we would do sometimes anyway, just to try to respect the space. Or we would let the Heart of Recovery people know, hey, can you let your people know if there's a mailing list that this is happening? So trying to have some respect and foresight about everyone in our community, rather than just being like, this is how we've always done it and deal with it. But since I think there was a real change in, I know there are a lot of people in recovery who are in Shambhala, a lot. And I think that wasn't always the case. And so really having to make those changes through having some kind of awareness about who's in the space and when. So that's just within the last couple of years. That was something actually really a year or two ago that we really tried to be mindful and aware of and thoughtful about. Okay, well, I won't hold you hostage. If no one has any questions, Alex, do you want to do the wrap up?
Certainly. Well, Shanté, thank you so much for leading us tonight and for sharing these stories and this wisdom from your own life. So thank you very much. And I want to thank everyone for joining us for tonight's online Dharma gathering. So as I mentioned before, this has been recorded, and it's going to be posted and accessible on the My Programs tab of your Shambhala Online account. That'll be by the end of the day tomorrow. And we'll send an email out to all of you once that recording is posted. Next week, we are very lucky to have Matthew Parkinson leading practice and giving a talk entitled Depression and the Great Eastern Sun. And I'd love to share just a few words from Mr. Parkinson on this. He says, relating to one's own state of mind and to the personal experience of depression can lead to feeling bad about feeling bad. Can we relate directly to our own sadness and melancholy, all the while knowing that we are basically good and primordially free? So I hope that you all will be able to join us next week for that. I'm going to put the link for that program into this chat box. So that link is for next week. But if you lose this link, you can find it just on shambhalaonline.org. It's right there on the first page. So again, thank you all so much for coming, and we hope to see you next week.
Have a good evening, everyone.